Yo, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of the SWUS. It is time for the last game of the college football season. Ohio State, Notre Dame in the national championship. Just want to thank you guys for the support this year. The channel grew a lot. Losing Andy was tough. He was a big part of what we did in the college football department this season. It's not going to be the same without him. But this season, I can't thank you guys enough for the growth. We got a lot of views, a lot of new subscribers. I have some big plans for the future. I have some big plans for next season. And your guys' support is what makes that all possible. So thanks so much for this season. Let's talk about the national championship on Monday night. As far as this week, things are going well for me, man. I'm having myself a nice little week. Had a terrible wild card weekend in the NFL playoffs last weekend. But since then, I mean, Monday night with the Rams-Vikings, had a great basketball week. All of a sudden, NFL starting to go my way. So I got some positivity coming into this natty. But anyway, Ohio State, Notre Dame National Championship. Let's do it.
Quick update. I recorded that earlier in the day. The streak continues. Make it 5 straight winning days. I went 5-1 today. Well, technically I went 3-1 today, but 2 of my golf bets from Wednesday night cashed today. So 5-1 today. The only loss was Eagles -6.5, which was only a half unit. So, man, I'm having a hell of a nice little run here. Hopefully this continues. Yeah, let's get into it.
I mean, is Cooper Rush worth 2.5 points? I would hope Quinn Ewers put up a decent stat line against Arizona State. If he didn't, we have a real problem.
You can say the same thing about Creighton. Okay, they had the one good game against Kansas at home.
When Toast talks about the kicking market, it's like some earth is flat shit. Andy, true or false, this is going to be a dog walking.
Dog walking. This is my dog walking of the day. I think it's going to be very ugly.
Dog walking.
I think this is going to be ugly.
Hey, get the sauce. All right, like I said, Ohio State, Notre Dame, the Irish are catching 8.5 points in this one. I do see an 8 out there, but for the most part, it's 8.5 across the board. Total sitting at 45.5 across the board. Take a look at the pie charts, and according to the data, action's coming in pretty split on this one. I mean, 55% of the tickets on Ohio State. Money's pretty close to 50-50. So action coming in on both sides of this one, but as I always say, take that data with a grain of salt. So let's talk about the national championship. And why don't we start with the last time these two programs won national championships? For Ohio State, it wasn't all that long ago, 10 years ago exactly. That was the Ezekiel Elliott team. Michael Thomas, the wide receiver, he was on that team. Urban Meyer was the head coach of that team. For Notre Dame, it's been a bit longer than that. Back in 1988, I was not even born yet. I was actually born 7 months after this. So when I was born, Notre Dame was the reigning national champions. Next thing we want to take note of is the fact that these two teams just played week 4 of last season. Ohio State got the win 17-14 in South Bend, or I think that was in South Bend. I hope that wasn't a neutral site. My bad if I'm misremembering. I'm pretty sure that was in South Bend. But if you remember the last play, Ohio State scored a touchdown to win the game on the last play, and Notre Dame only had 10 players on the field. Remember, it was a very controversial play. It was talked about for weeks after that. So Ohio State got the win on the very last play against a Notre Dame defense that only had 10 guys on the field. Now, I'm not sure how relevant this game is. I mean, the Will Howard Ohio State passing attack is much more explosive than the Kyle McCord Ohio State passing attack. And this Riley Leonard Notre Dame offense, this Notre Dame team, definitely better than the Sam Hartman Notre Dame team. So I'm not sure how relevant this information is. Thought it was interesting to point out. So let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with the Ohio State offense against the Notre Dame defense. Now, this is the national championship. Obviously, most of these graphics are going to have nothing but green on them. Ohio State, 4th in the country in yards per play, 9th in success rate. They're 4th in OFEI. The Notre Dame defense, 5th, 12th, and 2nd. So we got ourselves a battle here on this side of the ball. I mean, we got a battle on both sides of the ball, but this should be a particularly interesting one. Now, the first question we need to answer is, will this Ohio State offense be able to run the ball on this Notre Dame defensive front? If you look at the regular season and isolate it to just Ohio State's games against top 25 defenses, there are 5 of them during the regular season: Iowa, Oregon, Nebraska, Indiana, Michigan. In those games, Ohio State's run game was limited. They averaged less than 4 yards per carry, under 44% success rate per rush, which 43.8% really isn't that bad, just under 130 rushing yards per game. So this shows us that the Ohio State run game is capable of being stopped. We've seen it several times this year. I mean, shit, we just saw it last week against Texas, 81 rushing yards, 3.4 yards per carry. So the Ohio State run game is capable of being stopped. Here's the problem. Notre Dame's defense has shown us they're vulnerable to the run. I mean, in their games against top 25 offenses this year, I took Georgia Tech out because Haynes King didn't play in that game, and Georgia Tech's offense without Haynes King, especially earlier in the year, was awful. So in their games against top 25 offenses, minus the Georgia Tech game, they allowed over 189 rushing yards per game, 48% success rate per rush, over 4.7 yards per carry. So this Notre Dame run defense wasn't all that great when they saw good offenses. And honestly, when you look at their other 7 regular season games, still not even that great. 42% success rate per rush, over 120 rushing yards allowed per game. So this Notre Dame run defense is not elite. Now, if you're a Notre Dame fan, you're definitely pointing at these 2 games here. College football playoffs, first round and second round against Indiana and Georgia. Notre Dame shut the run down in both of them. Held Indiana to 63 rushing yards, 2.3 yards per carry. Held Georgia to 66 rushing yards, 2.3 yards per carry. So if you're a Notre Dame fan, you're probably cursing me out saying, how do you say our run defense is not elite? Look what we did to Indiana and Georgia. But like I said last week, Indiana and Georgia are pass-first offenses. Those are passing attacks, not rushing attacks. I thought Penn State was going to be able to run the ball in the Notre Dame defense, and I was right. Penn State had 204 rushing yards, 4.9 yards per carry, 50% power success rate, 12.2% stuff rate, 3.8 line yards. So Penn State really didn't have problems running the ball in this Notre Dame defense. Remember, Notre Dame is currently playing without one of the most important pieces on their defensive line, Riley Mills. He's out for the playoffs. He led the team in snaps on the defensive line and sacks. Their 300-pound defensive tackle led the team in sacks. He's out for this one. So I know that Judkins and Henderson and the Ohio State rushing attack, it's been inconsistent. It's been streaky. We've seen times where defenses were able to take the run away from Ohio State, but I don't think that's going to happen here. I mean, this Notre Dame defense is definitely vulnerable to the run. They're missing an important piece. I think Ohio State's going to be able to run the ball just fine in this game, which brings us to Will Howard and those elite Ohio State wide receivers against the Notre Dame secondary, and this is a very interesting matchup here. So on one side, you got Notre Dame. They run nothing but man coverage. They run more man coverage than any other defense I almost said in the NFL, in college football. First in man coverage frequency, and they're excellent at it. Now, on paper, Ohio State's one of the best passing attacks in the country against man coverage. This is where it gets interesting. If you look at Ohio State's big games this year, most of those opponents, when they've seen elite top-tier defenses, are primarily zone heavy. Tennessee, zone coverage. Michigan, zone coverage. Texas, last week, zone coverage. Iowa, zone coverage. Indiana, zone coverage. The majority of Ohio State's big games this year have been against defenses that run primarily zone coverage. Ohio State has seen 2 top-tier defenses that run man coverage this year. One is Oregon, and Will Howard had no problems at all, as you probably remember, throwing the ball on the Oregon defense. Shit, he did it twice. Once was on the road in Eugene, 28-35, 326 yards, 2 touchdowns, a 177 passer rating, and then he did it again in the playoffs, 17-26, 319 yards, 3 touchdowns, a passer rating over 206. So Oregon runs a lot of man coverage. Wasn't a problem for Will Howard whatsoever. But the other top-tier defense that Will Howard has seen this year that runs man coverage was Penn State. Week 10, they went on the road to Happy Valley. He wasn't all that great. Now, he wasn't bad, but 16 of 24, 182 yards, 2 touchdowns, a pick, a 149.5 passer rating. Now, Ohio State won the game, but if you remember, Penn State had first and goal on the 1. They could have tied the game late. It wasn't a beatdown at all. Now, to be fair, that one was on the road in a hostile environment. This is a neutral site playoff game. But still, the point is, Will Howard was struggling a little bit throwing the ball in this Penn State man coverage. And we cannot sleep on this Notre Dame pass defense. They shut all the critics up, including myself. The criticism of Notre Dame's defense was they didn't see any elite quarterbacks throughout the year, which is kind of true. I mean, Tyler Shuck in Louisville would be probably the only elite passing attack, only top 25 passing attacks they saw all year. Maybe USC with Maiava. Maybe you can throw them in there. But as a whole, they saw a lot of bad quarterbacks, a lot of backup quarterbacks this year. But again, they shut us all up in the college football playoff because in the first round, they saw Curtis Rourke in Indiana, which was an explosive passing attack this year. He scored a couple of late touchdowns in garbage time, but right before those 2 garbage time drives, Notre Dame was up comfortably. Curtis Rourke was 9 of 19, 94 yards and a pick. 4.9 yards per pass at them. So they shut Indiana's passing attack down. Then they saw Georgia, who granted did have a backup quarterback, but it's still Georgia, an elite SEC passing attack. He didn't do much of anything. 20 of 32, 234 yards, a touchdown, a 134 passer rating. And then they saw Drew Aller and Penn State, another great passing attack. Drew Aller, as I'm sure you remember, he really struggled against this Notre Dame defense. 12 of 23, 135 yards, a pick, 92.8 passer rating. So Notre Dame's pass defense deserves our respect. They've earned it. But you know who else has earned our respect and deserves it? Will Howard. Are you seeing what this kid's doing in the playoffs right now? I mean, there's something to be said about getting hot at the right time. Ohio State's offense is playing their best football right now. In the playoffs, he's completing over 73% of his passes. He's averaging over 306 passing yards per game, 6 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, an average pass rating over 181. That's in the 3 playoff games. 2 of those games were against Tennessee and Texas. Those might be top 5 defenses, certainly top 10 defenses. Oregon's defense is probably top 15. 3 elite defenses, and Will Howard is putting up elite numbers. So as a whole on this side of the ball, I don't want to sleep on Notre Dame's pass defense. They proved me wrong. This is an elite pass defense, but like I said before, I think Ohio State's able to run it. Notre Dame can be vulnerable to the run, and Will Howard against man coverage, especially if he has run support, he hasn't given us any reason to doubt him. So I think Ohio State's going to move the ball on this Notre Dame defense. I do. Now we get to the other side of the ball, and this is where it becomes pretty tough to support Notre Dame. We got to talk about the Irish offense, because truly on the other side, I think there is a strong case to be made for Notre Dame's man coverage. I wouldn't be surprised if Will Howard struggles a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised if Notre Dame's able to goad Will Howard into throwing a pick. Truly, I think Notre Dame's pass defense, they've earned my respect. I think they're able to give Will Howard problems. I do think Ohio State's able to run it, though, like I said. On this side of the ball, though, this is where it gets tough to make cases for Notre Dame. Now, on paper, Ohio State has the edge, but it's not dramatic. I mean, Ohio State, one of the best defenses in the country, as I'm sure you know. 2nd in the country in yards per play, 1st in success rate. They're 3rd in DFEI. Notre Dame's offense 6th and 31st. So you might be looking at this graphic thinking, Kyle, this isn't that bad. I mean, it's not that much of a discrepancy. But the thing is, this Notre Dame offense, it's pretty one-dimensional. They need to run the football. In this run game, it hasn't looked all that great when they've seen tough competition. This is from the regular season. As you see, on the full season, they have dominant rushing numbers. 6.4 yards per carry, over 225 rushing yards per game. Success rate per rush up close to 48%. They only played 2 games all year against top 20 rated run defenses, and in those games, the rushing numbers didn't look all that great. 4.24 yards per carry, success rate down below 41%. Remember, this is an offense that needs to run the ball, and the rushing numbers didn't look all that great when they saw great defenses. And then we get into the playoffs, and it didn't really get much better. I mean, you got that 198-yard touchdown run against Indiana. They had 5.5 yards per carry in the game, but if you take out that 98-yard run, they had 34 carries for 95 yards against Indiana, 2.7 yards per carry. They were able to run the ball a little bit against Georgia. Let's give them some credit. 4.2 yards per carry, 154 rushing yards on 37 rushing attempts, but it was mostly Riley Leonard. 14 carries, 80 yards for Leonard. I mean, everyone else on the team, 23 carries, 74 yards. 3.2 yards per carry. So let's give them a little credit. They were able to run the ball utilizing Riley Leonard a bit against Georgia. So how did they do running the ball in Penn State? Well, 2.8 yards per carry, just 117 rushing yards in the game, 2.3 average line yards. So they weren't able to generate push against Penn State. And this is an Ohio State defensive front that is not a joke. I mean, they got ran on one time. Literally one time this entire season. Week 7 on the road in Eugene, 155 yards, 5 yards per carry against that Oregon offense. Everyone else in the regular season was held to under 2.7 yards per carry, 36% success rate per rush. That's crazy. 2.69 yards per carry on the season. And how are things going in the playoffs for Ohio State's defensive front? Well, in the second round against Oregon, they held them to negative 23 rushing yards. You heard that right. Negative 23 rushing yards. Obviously, sacks had a lot to do with that. It's college football. They count those. But negative rushing yards for the game for Oregon. Last week against Texas in the semifinals, Texas had 2 yards per carry. 58 rushing yards in the game, 2.2 average line yards. Texas has an elite offensive line. They averaged 2.2 line yards. So they were not able to generate push against this Ohio State defensive front. And it's the same story with this Notre Dame offense. I mean, if they're unable to run the ball on early downs, they are I mean, they are terrible on passing downs. 24% success rate on passing downs against Georgia. They followed that up with a 36% success rate on passing downs against Penn State, which still isn't good, but for Notre Dame, it's better. So let's give them a little bit of credit. They did better on passing downs against Penn State, but this is Ohio State, and on the season, 29% success rate on passing downs. If you get into 3rd and long on Ohio State, you are in a situation against this pass rush. 29% success rate on passing downs on the season. And check this out. Against Texas in the Cotton Bowl, 23% success rate on passing downs. This is an Ohio State defense that if they get you into 3rd and long, you might as well just punt on 3rd down. Obviously, I'm joking, but seriously, you might as well just punt because you have just as good of a chance of turning the ball over or taking a big sack than you do of actually converting it. I mean, this pass rush is so good. They're 18th in pressure rate, 1st in sack rate, 21st in pass rush grade. Notre Dame's offensive line's been okay in pass protection. I mean, they're 66th in pass block. They're not absolutely terrible, but keep in mind their left tackle just got hurt last week. He's out. Knapp, the left tackle, ruled out for this game, and it gets deeper than that. The guard, who's another freshman who is projected to start in his spot, he's not 100% either. He's listed as questionable. Now, from what I'm reading, he's going to play, but they got a backup freshman guard playing left tackle, or actually, I think they're shifting their guard over to tackle, and this backup guard's going to play guard, whatever. But they have a backup freshman who's going to start on the offensive line who's not even 100%. So this Notre Dame offensive line, not only are they a little vulnerable in pass protection as it is, but they're not even 100%. If they're unable to run the ball on early downs against Ohio State, which I don't even think they're going to be able to consistently, they're going to be in a situation in these passing downs. So I'm sorry, Irish fans, there's just no way I could support the Notre Dame offense here. This is going to be an ugly one for Notre Dame's offense. Maybe they surprise me and come out and just outcoach the Ohio State coaching. Maybe they outcoach Knowles. I doubt it, but maybe. As a whole, I'd have to say on paper, Notre Dame's offense should be in a really tough situation, and they should really struggle to move the ball here against this Ohio State defense. Which means when it comes to betting this game, I am going to lay it here with Ohio State. I see an 8 on Caesars. I'm going to take it. Give me Ohio State -8. I know it seems crazy laying such a big number in the national championship, but keep in mind, college football playoff national championships have a history of being blowouts. I believe since they switched to the playoff format, I heard this on Josh Pate's show, the average margin of victory in the college football playoff championship game since they switched to format is 20.1. So blowouts in national championship games have been very common. I think we're going to see, to quote the late, great Andy, a dog walking. Give me Ohio State -8 in a dog walk. I'd also look towards Notre Dame team total under, but I think I'm just going to lay it. Give me the Buckeyes here, -8. We'll talk about it on the live show, which I believe is going to be at 11 a.m. Eastern time because it's Martin Luther King Day and there are daytime NBA games. So I think we're going to do a daytime live stream. So if you're able to make that, would love to see you in the comments, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Hit me up in the Discord if you need me. Thanks again for a great season. Please remember to bet responsibly. See you guys in the morning.